How's it going, guys? My name is Mittens, and today I'm going to make that long overdue video that some of you have been asking for, talking about the Classic WoW release information that we got a month ago at BlizzCon and the upcoming Battle for Azeroth expansion. Now, I know that I'm way behind with this. I know that, everybody was putting videos out as soon as BlizzCon released that information, and there was all the talk about ice cream and all that kind of stuff. And the point is that people were making videos very quickly. Some of them were premature in my opinion, and also I didn't really think it was that necessary to talk loads about this, especially not knowing loads at the time. Whereas now I've seen that there are a few people commenting on my videos, my vanilla videos, asking what my opinion is on this, because obviously I played vanilla private servers for a long time. I moved from different ones to different ones. I started off on Phoenix, then I went to Nostarius, and I went to Kronos. I've been on Elysium. I've been on a lot of different private servers, and I've seen a lot of them shut down, in some cases by Blizzard, in some cases by their own owners, and there's been a lot of talk over the years of whether or not we'd ever get legacy servers. I was one of the people who honestly didn't think we would until WoW was at a point where it was on the direct downturn and Blizzard just wanted more revenue. And so I've been pleasantly surprised, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, just to share my feelings. This isn't supposed to be particularly informative. I mean, it's a small channel. I reckon if you're watching this, you just want my particular take on it, having watched some of my other videos. So what do I think about the whole Classic WoW release information? Well, I think that, first of all, it was an incredibly smart move by Blizzard. Very, very smart. And here's why. It's not because of any downturn in subscribers and revenue, despite the fact that I think that that's probably happening. I mean, at the end of the day, every expansion that I know of has seen a dip in subscribers towards the end as the hype wears off and as people kind of take a break because they've been spending loads of time in WoW for the first year of the expansion and don't want to be playing it 24/7 anymore. But I don't think that that's the reason why they're doing classic servers with Legion, because at the end of the day, I'm pretty certain 100% of people really would agree that Legion was a step up from Warlords of Draenor, and it got a lot of subscribers back after WoD really kind of hit rock bottom in terms of how WoW has grown over the years. WoD was really the low point, and I think that Legion was the first expansion really since, I don't know, maybe it's subjective, but I think Legion was probably the first expansion since Wrath or maybe Kata where you could say that the game was growing again, both in terms of its subscribers but also in terms of its content and its direction, and it feeling like it's flourishing a second time, a rebirth if you will. Because really, MoP, a good expansion but not really popular with a lot of people, myself included. WoD, a very weak expansion, very lacking in content, a lot of content drought. And then Legion, which really did pick it up. They have solved, no matter what you think about Legion, you can't argue that there was no content being put out or that there was a content drought. I don't want to speak too soon because obviously we've just had the release of Antorus, and that might be stretching along for a very long time in the future before we get Battle for Azeroth. But they've said that they're going to be releasing these sort of drip-feeding small story elements and stuff leading up to the next expansion. So I don't think we'll get the same kind of content drought like we did in WoD and indeed in Mr. Pandaria. So I do think that Legion stopped the rot, so I don't think that's why they're releasing the classic servers. I think that they're releasing the classic servers because they know that the direction they've been taking the game in, particularly in the last two expansions, and especially with what they've got planned in Battle for Azeroth, they know that the game will be extremely different from what it was like in the original versions of the game, particularly the big three, that is Vanilla, the Burning Crusade, and Wrath of the Lich King. Now, of course, as time goes on and more expansions are released, the game is going to change. It's naturally going to change, not least because technology is being updated, stories are being updated, and the game world visually changes as a result of those things. But also because, the player base is changing, and as storylines end, new ones have to be written, which have nothing to do with the original content. I mean, how many times has the entire backstory of World of Warcraft been radically rewritten in order to keep up with this changing kind of nature of the game, and the fact that the game has been out now for, 13 years? Moving on to 14 years by the next anniversary. So I don't think that they're doing it because WoW is in a downturn. I think that really Legion has shown that WoW can grow again. I think that what they're doing is they're saying, we want to take Battle for Azeroth in a very, very new direction. If you look at what they're doing with this, it's clearly, there's some theme going on clearly where, what goes on with Sargeras at the end of the Antorus reign, I won't spoil that for anyone, and the messing up of Azeroth and the old god situation that we're pretty sure is going on there with N'Zoth and all of that jazz. They're trying to show that everything has gone to pot, really. Everyone is going crazy and everyone's at each other's teeth, and they want to demonstrate that with massive changes happening in the world. I mean, for Christ's sake, they're having the Alliance take over the Eastern Kingdoms, pretty much. They're having Teldrassil be burnt to ash. These are major changes to very original areas of the game, and indeed original areas of the Warcraft franchise. Lordaeron, Teldrassil, Darnassus, these sorts of places. And I think that what they did was they realised cleverly that if they were going to make such a massive change, it would probably rub off wrong on a lot of the player base. Maybe they looked back to Cataclysm and thought to themselves, when we made those changes, when we changed all of the zones in the game, when we changed a lot of the systems, and really Cataclysm was the expansion where WoW got modernised. I know people look to Wrath of the Lich King and say a lot of things changed there, but honestly those were kind of, in my opinion, a lot of the changes that occurred in Wrath were, because they were in their infancy, they didn't affect a lot of people. For example, if you look at Preach's video on the Legacy of Wrath, he talks about the coming up of the looking for group system, the advent of the LFG system, and how because he was in a good group, good guild at the time, he never even really thought about it until much later on in the game. Whereas Cataclysm was the point where people started the new expansion with a lot of changes already having been cemented and being improved upon in Blizzard's eyes. So Cataclysm was the beginning of the new, and I think that what they realised when they planned Battle for Azeroth was that when they did those changes with Cataclysm, when they rejuvenated the game and made those sweeping changes to every aspect of the game, from mechanics to the landscape, they knew that a lot of people stopped playing. And a lot of people did stop playing. A lot of the people I knew from my original days in Burning Crusade and Wrath really stopped playing once Cata came out, because it felt like a very, very different game. Now, a lot of people started playing, new players, definitely. A lot of people started playing in Cataclysm, that's true. But it was a new kind of cohort, really. And I think that what Blizzard has realised is that if they bring out classic servers, either simultaneously or a little bit after they bring out Battle for Azeroth, they're appeasing both camps. Because it's one thing to say, I don't want to play World of Warcraft anymore because it's not the game I knew and loved. And it's another thing to say, I don't want to play World of Warcraft anymore, even though the game that I knew and loved is there as an option. So I think it's been a very clever move. Now, that's my opinion on why they have launched the classic servers now, when I used to think that they wouldn't do so unless WoW was really in a rut. As for my thoughts about their ideas for classic servers and what the classic servers will be like, I've seen a lot of interesting discussion and dialogue regarding the nature of these servers. Will they be 100% Blizz-like, which is the term we use to describe the private servers that we played on? Will they have the UI that they used to have? Will they have the low quality graphics of the 2004 model game? Will they have things like a complete lack of a looking for group system? Will they have weapon skills? All of these sorts of things. Will they have mounts obtainable at the ridiculously high prices that they were obtainable at back in the game, in the original game? And there is a bit of a debate. There seems to be two different camps on this. There seems to be the players who want a vanilla experience, but they want modern convenience, and the players who want 100% Blizz-like, the purists. And I've got to say, I don't think that there's much of an argument to this. I think that really, the vanilla servers have to be 100% vanilla, otherwise you're not actually giving us classic servers. What you're actually just giving us is a simulated experience, a loosely simulated experience. And really, the weird thing is, it might seem a bit masochistic, but a lot of people played vanilla, myself included. And you'll see this if you watch any of my vanilla playthroughs. A lot of us enjoyed vanilla because of its flaws. Like a lot of people who play nostalgic games, whether it's the original Deus Ex, or Half-Life, or Age of Empires, or any of those really iconic games from a previous generation, we like them because of their flaws. Not just in spite of their flaws, we like them because of them, because it reminds us of that nostalgic element. It reminds us that these games are old, they come from a different era, and almost an innocence, a naivety in game making where it wouldn't fly now. Things like the AQ event, things like 40-man raids, that if you tried to implement them now, the community would be up in arms. We liked that in the original game because it showed its home baking, if you know what I mean. The fact that it was a smaller team and they weren't always thinking about, will this work, will it won't work. They were just throwing things out there and trying it. Preach described it as the Wild West of WoW, which I think was a a really good term to use for it. So I hope that the classic servers are 100% Blizz-like, and honestly I think that they will be. I think that Blizz knows that the people who want Classic WoW, the people who really want it, the people who are extremely keen, some of my audience really, are looking for 100% Blizz-like service. That's what they want. So that's my opinion on that, and that's what I think we'll get. If we don't get that, I'll be surprised, and I'll be frankly very disappointed, because in my opinion that changes a lot of the reason why we play the game in the first place. I mean, hell, just play in one of those strange guilds, and I say strange, but it sounds quite fun actually, who, you know, max their level out at 60 and wear white gear and try to run molten core and stuff like that. What's the difference if you're only bringing back like 50% of the systems as we knew them in vanilla? You know, vanilla is more than just the aesthetic, it's also the mechanics of the original game. So that's what I think about that, and like I said, I will be disappointed if they change that, and I'll make a video on that if they do, although I doubt that we'll know anything more about these servers for at least a good 6 months, maybe longer, to be honest with you. One other point that I want to talk about in regards to the Classic servers is, what will they do when Classic comes to an end? I think this is a question that not a lot of people have thought about. Some people have been saying, what will they do? Will it become a Burning Crusade servers, and will they essentially do what EverQuest did, where they started off with progression servers, essentially, where they started off with the classic game, the 1999 version of the game, and they just went through every expansion as a certain amount of time had passed, equivalent to the amount of time that the expansion lasted in its original form. I'm wondering if that's what they'll do. I do wonder, but at the same time, I think that would be a mistake, because what happens if you get people who start playing the game 2 years from now, when they're thinking about, you know, releasing Naxxramas in the classic service and then bringing it onto TBC, and who want to enjoy vanilla and can't because the servers are being updated to the Burning Crusade? You know, it raises an interesting question of, will there end up being just a cycle, essentially? And I don't have the answer to that, and I don't know if they have the answers. I don't know how much they've thought about this. I think that they've either thought about it a lot or not at all, to be honest, from what I've seen. You know, because one thing that I recall with a lot of the private servers I was on, particularly Phoenix, which was the original big boy of private servers, which is what I played on way back in 2013, they had been out by the time I started playing in 2013. They'd been out already for like 3 years. I think that server launched in October 2010. And the reason why I mention this is because when I started, they still hadn't released all of Naxxramas. They were deliberately releasing the last few bosses of Naxxramas. Like, they'd been releasing Naxxramas in wings, I believe, but they had the 4 wings, and then when I started, they had the Dragon and Kel'Thuzad left to be released, and they kept that unreleased for like a year. And indeed, I think I'd stopped playing before they released the end of Naxxramas, and the reason why is because guilds will complete these raids very quickly compared to the original game in vanilla. You know, players who will be playing vanilla classic servers, you know, they know what they're doing, and people have a much better understanding of the game now, and they will know life the hell out of that game. You know, gotta watch what I'm saying because of the YouTube overlords, but you know, they'll do what they can, and they'll get through that content very quickly. And these private servers, as a result, released the content in drip feeding. They did it very slowly to drag it out, and I don't know what Blizzard will do in that regard. One thing that I thought would be very, very interesting, although I think this is a pipe dream, is if they released vanilla-like content. Like, say, you know, in an alternate world, Blizzard decides not to release expansions, decides not to release the Burning Crusade, but instead just releases patches for World of Warcraft. And imagine if they don't change a lot of the systems and update a lot of things. What would it have been like if we got, I don't know, a kind of Hellfire Citadel patch after Naxxramas, or, you know, a Lich King raid patch? It would be interesting to see what would happen if Blizzard decided to release, you know, extra content in the vanilla vein. I think that would be very interesting for a lot of people who like vanilla as a game style, as a vehicle, rather than just the vanilla experience. Excuse me. So that's what I think about Classic WoW based on what we already know, and I don't think we're going to get any more knowledge for now. Just some basic thoughts on that. As for Battle for Azeroth, well, you know, it's even more difficult to speculate on that, isn't it? Because we don't know anything about Battle for Azeroth yet. We know a few things, but whereas with classic servers, we had a lot to go on. We've already had private server experiences. You know, we know what the original game was like, and it seems like it's going to be a toss-up between a convenience vanilla or a 100% Blizz-like vanilla. As with Battle for Azeroth, I mentioned earlier in this vid that I liked the cleverness of Blizzard in that they're giving us the vanilla experience for those who want nostalgia and who want something very close to the core of what Warcraft is, and that Battle for Azeroth seems to be taking a step in a new direction. And normally I don't like that, because I am a nostalgic player, and because really I'm one of those people who thinks that WoW is kind of become a different genre. It's gotten far too close to StarCraft for my liking, for example. It's why I'm not really massively into Legion at the moment, because it's gone off into space, literally. But but I like what they're doing with Battle for Azeroth for a few reasons. Firstly, it's fantasy, and I play this rather than Star Wars or WildStar or EVE or Star Trek Online or any of the other games. I play WoW because I like fantasy. You know, I grew up in, like a lot of you, I grew up in the Lord of the Rings era, that kind of thing. And I'm glad that Battle for Azeroth is taking the game back to our home planet, right, for one, but also seems to be kind of returning to these classic WoW themes, you know, of conflict and travelling through very varied landscapes. You know, if you look at the Kulturas zones and compare them to the Zandalar zones, and that's amazing, by the way, because I used to be a troll player, and I love the fact that they're bringing the Zandalari back. I thought that they had more plans for the trolls. I'm glad to see that I was correct on that. If you look at the comparison between those zone themes, it's very varied. The zones look very, very different from one another, which is really good. It is really good because, you know, a lot of the last places that we were at in this expansion were very samey. I mean, there was variance, don't get me wrong, in the main, you know, the core Legion zones. Like, if you look at Val Shara and compare it to, I don't know, well, any of the zones. If you compare Val Shara to, like, Stormheim, for example, you know, those zones are very, very different, no doubt. But if you look at the Broken Shore and compare that to Argus, I mean, sure, you've got Macquarie, don't get me wrong, Macquarie looks fantastic, really good, like something that I wish had been in WoD, to be honest with you. But there's been a lot of sci-fi themed stuff, which some people like, but I personally don't. I like that Battle for Azeroth is getting back to grips. The other thing that I like about Battle for Azeroth is that it's not about the Burning Legion anymore. The last two expansions have had a heavy theme of the Burning Legion involved in them. And maybe it's just me, although I've heard other YouTubers talk about the same thing, but the Legion became a caricature by the end. It just became like something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. You know, you had these big, bad, roided up demons who were going, we will destroy you, and you'd knock them down, and then the next wave would come on and you'd knock them down. And other than the beginning where we had Varian and Vol'jin die, there wasn't really much to show for the Legion. And since then, we've just been knocking them down at every turn. There's not been a lot of fight back. There's not been like a Wrathgate sort of situation, in my opinion. So I'm kind of glad that we're done with the Legion, because they felt pretty soft by the end of this expansion. And I think that with the old gods, because they're entities and they're not all of this kind of obvious, you know, roided up big red demon thing, it's a bit more kind of, I don't know, nuanced and subtle, which I think WoW would need some subtlety, even if it is all over the top. It needs some subtlety to make you actually want to go out there and fight these enemies. And of course, again, with old gods and with being on Azeroth with various different themes, trolls and Naga and old gods and whoever else we might get, there's variance. Whereas with the demons, you know, I mean, if you look at Antorus and if you look at Tomb of Sargeras, I see a lot of similarity there personally. A lot of demons and a lot of green. And I'm glad that we're going to be moving away from those themes. I'm like the demon equivalent of the people who are really bored of having orc-themed raids, for example. And I don't blame them, because Siege of Algramar to me was a lot like Blackrock Foundry. Very like Blackrock Foundry, in my opinion. So to sum up, I'm quite happy about the direction that the game is going in. I have positive views on both the classic stuff that they're doing and Battle for Azeroth. Fundamentally, I think that we're in a position of change, and we are in a position of uncertainty, but I think it's, you know, quietly optimistic uncertainty. I think that most people look forward to Battle for Azeroth and think, you know what, this is going to be quite interesting. I certainly think that it's good for people like myself who aren't, you know, I'm a massive Horde player, as you guys know. I've been playing Horde for the last 7-8 years now. But I think that Battle for Azeroth will be a very good expansion for those of us who want to experience both factions. You know, Legion wasn't really that expansion, let's be honest. Legion was an expansion where you could play it on either faction and your experience would be pretty much identical. Whereas with WoD, it was quite different, at least with the first zones, and then kind of became narrower and narrower as things went on. Battle for Azeroth is going to be an expansion where the two factions, I think, will have things quite differently. And I think it will be an expansion where you can start off playing as the Horde, and then if you go and start playing as the Alliance, you'll get a different experience. I think that will be really, really good. I've missed that. I liked how you have to go back all the way to Wrath, really, to the point where you had different leveling areas and you kind of met in the max level zones. And I thought that was awesome. And I think that WoW needs that. It needs more of the spirit of faction v faction stuff. And I think that Battle for Azeroth is going to bring that back. I won't speculate on the different sort of proposed systems and mechanics that are going to be in the game, like the what is it, the war fronts, the island scenarios, you know, the kind of mini RTS mini games that are going on, because honestly I've watched the Blizzard announcements and I've watched Preacher's video on it and I've watched some other videos, but I don't know a huge amount about that kind of thing, and my interest is more in story and in theme, you know, an experience of the players and nostalgia and that kind of stuff, rather than the mechanics. I think that if you want to look at the mechanics, I'd go over and look at someone like Preach or Bellular is a really good channel for that sort of thing. But anyway guys, I was just spitballing here. It's been a long time, and I thought I'd end the video by talking about my own situation and why I've been away for a long time, because I think that some of you might be interested in that. Those of you who aren't, you can switch off now. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe and all that stuff. But anyway guys, yeah, so I've been doing a master's degree for the last 3 or 4 months, and that's kept me really busy. But a lot of you will probably be thinking, well, you haven't made videos for a while before that, you know. I haven't been making videos since the beginning of 2017. It's been a long time. And you know what, the honest truth is that I was kind of disappointed with the direction the private servers were going. I think that the private server hype really dropped off after Nastarius shut down. And that's part of the reason why I'm so glad that classic servers are going to be a new thing, by the way. But also, you know, I was losing interest in a lot of different games and a lot of WoW in general. Like I said, I fell off the Legion bandwagon relatively early, around the release of the Nighthold, honestly. And it took me a long time. It's taken me a long time to get back into it, partially because of the fact that I've been so busy with my master's degree. And I don't really know where exactly I want to go with the channel. I don't know whether I want to make like occasional updates like this one where I talk about big announcements, or whether I want to try and make series, because I felt like I was putting a lot of time and effort into some series and trying to get results from it that weren't showing, when I wasn't really certain if it was worth the effort, you know. I mean, it takes a lot of time, as those of you who are also on YouTube know. It takes a lot of time to edit these videos, and it takes definitely a lot of energy you could be spending doing something else for yourself. With your free time when you're not busy with work or school or whatever it might be. And I kept wondering, is this what I really want to do? And it took a long time, and really what brought me back to do this video was seeing some of the comments and people asking things like, are you dead? And no, I'm not dead, I'm perfectly good. And so I'm not sure where I'll go, but you know, I have a few ideas, so don't be surprised if the channel starts getting updated a bit more regularly. And you know, if you want to support the channel and if you want to show that support, feel free to do so. I always love seeing you guys' comments and replying to them when I can, and I hope that you enjoy these videos. I try to put a bit of effort into them. I try to put a lot of heart into them, you know, a lot of passion, and I certainly appreciate you guys' support. So thank you guys. Apologies if this video was a little bit ragged. It is my first one in a long while, and I was just wanting to talk about my feelings about the upcoming expansions, if you will, because we're getting Classic and BFA for World of Warcraft. So there we are, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope I see you very soon. Goodbye.